Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get week 59 of today's Tolkien Times going with another Middle-earth Map Monday. Now, last week we looked at the longest surviving successor kingdom of Arnor, the realm of Arthedain. At the end, we read about how in Third Age 1974, the Witch King captured Fornost and drove out the last of the Dunedain, with the last king of Arthedain, Arvedui, fleeing to the north. And that's where we'll pick up today, with where he fled to, Forochel. Far to the north of Hobbiton, almost 300 miles due north, up in the northern waste of Forodwaith, lies the southern edge of the great ice bay of Forochel. And I suppose, before I go any further, I will need to address the pronunciation. For the longest time, I've called it, or I've heard it called, Forochel or Forochel, but of course, the last syllable with the CH follows the pronunciation rules in Appendix E. There, Tolkien explains that the CH is only used to represent the sound heard in Bach in German or Welsh, not that in English church. So, Forochel is correct. It's certainly not Forochel. Now, one other thing, though, am I getting the stress right? I'm not sure about that, and I'm open to being wrong. If we look at the rules on stress, we know that in words of 3 or more syllables, like Forochel, the stress falls on the last syllable but one. That would be the O in this case, where that syllable contains a long vowel, a diphthong, or a vowel followed by 2 or more consonants. Well, there's no diphthong, and that's a short O, or we would have a little accent over it. So the question is whether the CH counts as 2 or more consonants, since it is a single consonantal sound. If it is a single consonant, then Forochel would be correct. But if it's 2 consonants, then it's Forochel. Now, I'm going to stick with Forochel for now, but your mileage may vary. Oh, if you want to pronounce it like a Gondorian, check this part out about the CH. Except at the end of words and before T, this sound was weakened to H in the speech of Gondor, and that change has been recognized in a few names such as Rohan, Rohirrim. So, a Gondorian might change the CH to an H on its own and pronounce it Forochel. Now that we've spent way too much time talking about how to pronounce the name of a place that isn't even mentioned in the narrative of The Lord of the Rings, just the appendices, let's talk about where in Middle-earth it is. Now, I've already said it's about 300 miles north of the Shire, and that it's in the northern waste of Forodwaith. But that means I get to explain that to you first. The northern waste is the large, cold, and mostly empty region far to the north on the continent of Middle-earth. It's north of the mountains of Angmar, north of Gundabad, north of the Ered Mithrin. Now, on most of your maps, and I say most of your maps, more on that in a minute, you'll see it called Forodwaith, which means North Region or Northlands. And that's interesting because in the footnote to the mention of the Losoth in Appendix A, we read that these are a strange, unfriendly people, remnant of the Forodwaith, men of far-off days, accustomed to the bitter colds of the realm of Morgoth. So is the word Forodwaith the name for the region or the name for the people? Yes. And word nerdery on this will help. Forod you already know, right? That means north. We see that in the names Forodwaith and Forochel, but also we see it in the Quenya cognate Forman in Formanos. Now, Forod literally means right hand, but we've talked about that before too. Elves navigate based on the west, so Forod, right hand, is north, and Hyar, left hand, is south. But that second element, Wyth, is a mutated version of Gwaith, which can mean people, men, or folk, but it can also mean region. So, Forodwaith people, Forodwaith region. Now, remember when I said that it's Forodwaith on most of your maps? Well, if you have an early map before 2005, you'll see Christopher Tolkien's original map for The Lord of the Rings. There, you'll see the words Northern Waste written far to the north, and just below it, along the mountains, the name Forodwaith, as though they're 2 separate places. Maybe Forodwaith is a region in the Northern Wastes. Christopher redid the map, which was originally drawn in 1953, for Unfinished Tales in 1980, and he explains then, "My first intention was to include in this book the map that accompanies The Lord of the Rings, with the addition to it of further names. But it seemed to me on reflection that it would be better to copy my original map and take the opportunity to remedy some of its minor defects, to remedy the major ones being beyond my powers." Well, one of those minor defects was this particular issue on the map, as Christopher explains. It may be noted that the northern waste, marked at the head of my original map, seems in fact certainly to have been intended as an equivalent to Forodwaith. Well, that updated 1980 map has been included in every edition of The Lord of the Rings since 2005. Now, Forodwaith is the northern waste, the Northlands, the North region, and in that vast region is the Cape of Forochel. Now, the Cape is much, much larger than you probably have on your map. As Christopher writes, the water marked on my original map as the Ice Bay of Forochel was in fact only a small part of the bay, referred to in Appendix A as immense, which extended much further to the northeast, its northern and western shores being formed by the great Cape of Forochel, of which the tip, unnamed, appears on my original map. In one of my father's map sketches, the northern coast of Middle-earth is shown stretching in a great curve east-northeast from the Cape, the most northerly point being some 700 miles north of Carn Dûm. Now, Forochel, then, is the region of Forodwaith that surrounds the ice bay formed by the Cape of Forochel. And it is home to the Losoth, the strange, unfriendly people we mentioned earlier, the remnant of the Forodwaith who were accustomed to the cold weather. The text also tells us that the Losoth house in the snow, and it is said that they can run on the ice with bones on their feet and have carts without wheels. Now, we'll save the word nerdery on the Losoth for Wednesday, but now you know about Forodwaith, Forochel, and a little bit about the snowmen or Losoth. As for the end of Arthedain, I'll make it quick. The Losoth reluctantly helped our Vedwi, but they were afraid of the Witch King's power, which they believed extended to the weather. Still, they didn't let him starve or freeze to death. Later, after Círdan got news of his escape, he sent a ship to retrieve him. Now, the Losoth told our Vedwi, do not go on board. Do not mount on this sea monster. They suggested that, look, have your people bring us food and everything else that you need, and you can stay here until the Witch King goes home. For in summer his power wanes, but now his breath is deadly, and his cold arm is long. Sadly, our Vedwi disregarded the counsel, and the ship was subsequently destroyed when a storm drove snow and ice upon it, eventually crushing the hull. Now later, the Rangers would get news of all of this from the Losoth, presumably when they traded for the Ring of Barahir, which our Vedwi had given to their chief. And that does it for Forochel and for Middle-earth Map Monday. But if you have a mailbag question you'd like me to answer in Series 9, please email it to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Send it in and let them know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Speaking of which, I am grateful for the support of my patrons. You guys are the ones who make it possible for me to invest the time and resources into producing these episodes. Now, if you'd like to be a part of that, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get a bonus episode every week, and more. And then please join me again tomorrow in today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.